Welcome to a new episode of our podcast, Lead the Future, Change the Conversation. An unedited, honest conversation to create the future. I'm Arjan Visser, futurist and your host. Join me at a chat with my friend Rob Schulz on When Healthy Leadership is the Answer. What could be the question? Rob is a fellow traveler, an entrepreneur, a coach, and an investor business owner. He is a prophetic visionary who imagines what is possible. Rob, welcome back in the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Good to be here.
Yeah, I loved our conversation last time.
Good, me too.
Let's wrestle around that statement, or actually overarching question. When healthy leadership is the answer, what could be the question?
Okay, well, I'm glad you asked, Arjan, because
How spontaneous your reaction.
So I was thinking, I think that healthy leadership has to start with your own life, and then that would spill out, hopefully, into the life of your family. So my first question would be, how do we encourage individuals and families to flourish? And leading on from that, how do we create companies, charities, communities where people flourish? Yeah. So that's my question.
Well, when I hear that scaling, I immediately think of the word overflow.
Yeah.
So if you want your family to flourish, you have to flourish. And I don't mean that in a cause and effect, but as more as like both need to. So the first question that you can more or less address is, how do I flourish so that my family flourish? And I think in that perspective, a company is a size of your household that goes beyond your family, and the people of your company, including yourself, they participate in society or community. So could be a ripple effect, but it starts with, how do I flourish so that others will flourish? So how do you flourish, Rob?
I'm the one asking the questions.
Yes.
You want me to answer? I think one of the ways that we flourish is to make sure that we give ourselves time. And by giving ourselves time, what I mean is, rather than rushing around and doing all of the many things that always need doing and will always need doing till the day we die and beyond, actually making sure that we create time for self-development. And that might seem like a dirty word or an overused word, but I think time where, time to learn, time to be, time to gather, even if it's just time to gather your thoughts. But I think not rushing around all of the time, and giving yourself space to be, which I know, it's said a lot, but no matter how much we're speaking about it, I think so many people are struggling with just that one basic thing of creating a space where you can just be, even for a few moments. So I think that's an important part of it.
I like that, like space. I like that word space, physical space in your agenda, but definitely a mental space. It's like, how do you perceive reality?
So I've started. I mean, I've tried for many years, and have different levels of success, but I've tried to have a space in the morning to reflect,
Yeah.
and I definitely find that, and I don't feel like it's like a reward or a punishment thing. I think it's just a fact that if you start your day in a place of peace, in a place of reflection, in a place of thinking about what's actually matters to you, what centers you, then actually inevitably, that tends to be one of the best, if not the best part of your day. And secondly, the rest of your day just goes better for you and for everyone else, because you're centered. And the irony is, if you start your day with the first thing you do is pick up your phone, find out what's happening in the world, find out what other people want you to do, start checking your emails, your track is straight, and so it feels like you're serving other people, but the reality is you're serving no one, and you're not being you, and you're not thinking about actually who you are and what you need from this day, and how you can do things, or just be. You're immediately running down rabbit trails.
Yeah.
And so that's
So actually you have, it triggers many thoughts. It's like, you could say, like, how do I live creative instead of reactive? Knowing it's the same 8 letters, but it's like the opposite stance to what we experience. I love it what you say. Like, in my words, well, actually, that's what I hear you say. Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but starting the day with whatever you need to realign your focus with who you are. And that has to do with being aware of who you are and who you are becoming.
Yeah.
And one of the words that came back to me, like when you said space, and that keeps coming back in the podcast conversations, and that's the word future. If we interpret the word future as something ahead on our timeline, we easily miss the point, because that's the reactive stance. You could easily miss the point that the root words actually indicate that a better interpretation would be coming to your essence. It's like, it's that unfolding who you are and desiring to do good, be positive of mind. I connect that to flourish. Like, to flourish is to blossom, is to give expression from who you are. It's the who is the central question. The central question is not the how, the where to, the what, but it is the who am I called to become, called to be. How do I come to my full essence? And so starting the day with self-reflection or self-awareness, but it is alignment with who I am and which part I prepare to unfold next. To flourish, we think of a flower. Blossom, we think of a flower. And it's getting winter over here, but in the spring we see all the flowers just first come up and then unfold in a way. So healthy leadership, I would think, like, that is preparing for unfolding. So, and of course, a flower has a purpose, not just to be beautiful when it becomes to its essence, but it is beautiful when it becomes to its essence. and it is part of a bigger ecosystem. And that's, I think, where it connects to community, where your
Yeah.
overflow of inner circle, family, household, company, that's your domain
Mm.
as a leader. In the
Mm.
community, it's a shared domain, but
Mm.
you are like adding value when you are beautiful,
Mm.
but you're part of the ecosystem as well.
Yeah, it's a guy who I've followed and who inspires me quite a lot. Who meditates, and he calls meditation spiritual unfoldment. So it's like if
Yeah.
like you're like this, you're mentally and emotionally, and meditation is about becoming like that. And I think that's what that is about. Because if you start the day like that, and then you just continue the day like that, holding on very tightly to all the things that you care about and all the things that you want to get done, then well, you just have a heart attack, don't you? But eventually, that's where that leads.
Yeah.
And it's how you start each day and then continue each day, staying open. Which is and I was reflecting on what you're saying. You know, if you think about a flower, you could argue, you know, when it's still a seed, it's still complete in that all of the information is there, and then when it's just a stem and when it's a bud, and actually it's still at every stage it's beautiful.
Yeah.
Thinking about it, in a sense, you could say at the point that the flower opens, you could argue it's beautiful. People who love spring might prefer the bud to the flower, but the thing you can say about the flower is that it's more mature. That it's gone through more levels, and actually now it's giving away its pollen and its scent, and
Yeah.
it's displaying all of its colours. And I think that's so it's maturity, isn't it? I think.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Um,
and being fruitful in every stage of
yeah.
your maturity.
So if
Yeah.
it's so, I mean, we haven't, not that we're bottom it out, and if you want, the whole conversation can just be about individual, but we all work.
You want to change gear? Come on.
Well, I want to change. I want to change gear, but I want to, you know. So let's say you are in that situation and you're self leadership, and you're doing that in your own life and in the life of your family, if you're blessed to be in a family. But let's say you lead a charity or a company or even a community. How do you create an organization or a community whereby people can flourish, and by that, where people can self-lead, be creative, be themselves, while also being profitable if it's a company, or achieving the goals if it's a charity, and serving the people they're set up to serve, and being sustainable. So how do you allow people to be themselves and to flourish, while still,
Mhm.
if it's a company, hitting the bottom line, and if it's a charity, serving the people you're there for? How do we do that?
Yeah. Well, first, without the tension of the bottom line, because actually what we talk about is top line.
Explain.
Well, you know, bottom line is getting the job done, getting the bills paid.
Yeah.
Top line is how we grow from it, not in numbers and being a part of the machine, but actually that it is not just the time and space where we give our best, but also is where we develop our best. And there could be a tension that has partly to do with the interests, the motivation of leadership, the environment created.
Mm.
If people are there just for their hands, and please don't contribute your own thoughts to it, leave them outside, then it becomes an isolated segment from the rest of life, where we just exchange our sweat and tears for paycheck.
Yeah.
So I think if you take that one as that's really like cruel black and white bottom line, but that is the setting. So I think if we go back to the owner of the atmosphere. So I'm not talking about leadership, but actually I talk about ownership. We set the scene. So take another example than flowers, because maybe we become too pink in our story. If you think about sailing, if you learn to sail, you need an environment that supports that. So the environment decides a bit where you end up with your boat, where the wind comes from. If you mature in sailing, you advance in your skill sets, then the wind is not deciding where you go to, but how you set your sail decides where you go. Leadership is setting your sail and be aligned with where you want to go. Ownership, I would more say, that has to do with the equipment of the boat and has to do with the circumstances. So if there is a high wind force predicted, you don't let those learn to sail out on the water. So going back, I think it is, if you want people to flourish, you need to have an environment that stimulates that. And I think rewarding is a too poor choice of words. So really supports it. You need to have circumstances that, so focus on what's important. Stop celebrating people, but make sure they are seen and heard. We tend to say, I don't want to be tolerated, I want to be celebrated. Well, if you celebrate it with incentives and being the high achiever in those things, then it's a burnout format. So now you want to be seen and heard. So there are so many things in the environment, the atmosphere or the culture, which is actually the context, the relational context, because that decide. Like, we could talk about people, you're allowed to make mistakes and learn, but if your mistakes kept being remembered and the memory kept being refreshed, because there is competition and envy in the environment, then it's a nice statement, but actually it's a lie. So
sorry, carry on.
Well, that's what I think is the first thing, that if you want people to flourish, create a greenhouse that accelerates that growth and flourishing, but don't take a cold place and use the words. So it's the words, it's the actions, but also the environment created for that others are inspired, stimulated to follow you. And that's, I think, where leadership, ownership comes together. You model it yourself by setting the sail despite the circumstances, but you create for others the circumstances so that it's safe for them to experiment with their interpretation or following your example. That's without the tension, of course, of the bottom line.
When you say without the tension of the bottom line,
oh, you said, how can you create an environment where people flourish, but you have to survive. That is the thing. You don't flourish in an environment of survival. So
no, but how do you? I mean, just to interrupt for a second and rewind. I think when you said about people being seen and heard, I think a way that I find helpful to think of it is to be known.
Truly known.
That's so important. Truly known. But I think it's easy to say about not, if you're just in a place where it's about survival, then you're not going to thrive. But for example, I've got a friend who works in a service sector, in the public sector, and two organizations that they're involved in are threatened with not surviving, and everyone's working very hard, and everyone's doing so it's, my question is, when your back is to the wall, when you don't know whether you're going to be able to pay the rent next month, when you don't know whether you're going to be able to keep on your staff, how then do you, what does it actually mean? Where does the rubber hit the road? How do you lead differently? So where you do have to make sure you can switch the lights on tomorrow, you do have to make sure that you can feed people or whatever it is, and encourage people to thrive. What does it mean practically? What happens differently in good organizations with good leadership, healthy leadership? What does healthy leadership look like when you don't know whether you'll be able to pay the electricity bill tomorrow?
Well, this is really the hardest question. And to be really vulnerable, this is the real question that is everywhere. So, and to be really, well, start with the disappointment. No one can tell you how. Those who can, I would not say manage or deal, but work and grow in the paradox between those things, because it's a paradox. And
what is the paradox? Explain what the paradox is.
In strategic thinking, there are two ways ahead. The really straightforward one, cause and effect, or the paradox. And the paradox is a contradiction because you don't have the perspective yet how it works together for good. So they seem that they're contradicting forces, but that is because the perspective needs to be higher. And how is the perspective getting higher? That's the personal development journey. So giving an answer to this question, how, would mean you could solve it with cause and effect. You can't. I would nearly say the only one who has the key is the owner of the environment. If the owner of the environment finds the how, he has the authority and authenticity to execute it, which is needed to create that environment for others to flourish. So that's one aspect of the paradox. Another aspect of the paradox is that through maturity, with the example of this learning to sail, through the maturity, you switch from dependency on the environment to setting your sail. So if you are in survival mode and you are reactive to the circumstances, which you are when you are with your back to the wall, there is this deadlock that keeps you hostage in that setting, and higher perspectives, another perception of reality, unlocks it. It's the same like when you talk about the problem, the biggest part of the problem is your definition of the problem. If you can redefine by an updated perspective your definition, you already start to think and become creative and add solutions. So when you're hostage, you need others to inspire you, and you need to create the mental space, which is so hard when you're overwhelmed by the circumstances. But you need space where you're not overwhelmed and the creativity starts to flow, and you can gain in higher perspective of who you are and how you will unfold in an authentic way. And that's what it is, the paradox, because it seems like it's impossible. But the difference between impossible and possible is personal growth. And the personal growth follows the perspective. So you need to get out of that the survival mode circumstances overwhelm you so that you can open up and at the end grow yourself so that you can influence the environment and start, hard word for me to pronounce in English, stop being the um, barometer and get back to, no, it's my space. I am the thermostat.
Okay.
And so I'm really sorry to say, like, there is no fix for this, but there is an invitation for a journey, because that's the weird thing of a paradox. Higher perspective, you need to get higher up the mountain to look over the individual obstacles to see if there is a blueprint in between that they can work all together for good.
So if someone was, so let's say someone's leading an organization and they're in this position whereby, it's not clear whether the organization will survive. It's not clear for whatever reason that there'll be enough money, or what are the practical things that you would say to a leader in terms of how they run their own life and how they lead in a work sense as well, and how they create that environment for other people?
Well,
what does it mean to be the thermostat? How do you create that climate? What does it actually mean tangibly?
actually, the whole sequence of our conversation describes the journey. So someone is in that space. Many of us are in that space, and rude to say, many are heading full speed to that direction because they keep doing what on the short term is rewarded, but there is no clarity how it will contribute for the next phase. So the short answer is get real and confess that you need help to get real, and the help will help you to start with what you said at the beginning of the day. Have that moment of alignment between who I am becoming with what I'm going to do. And the hardest thing is when nothing seems to work and you feel that you are the only one in this space. Well, embrace leaders are lonely, because you can't talk about every frustration you have about what's not working or every thought you have about what's the next thing. Because people, you don't want to just give them extra baggage. So you are lonely, but it's never, 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 never an excuse to isolate yourself. So ending the isolation stops when you ask for help to get back to become real with you are who you're called to be and who you want to become.
So where does somebody go to get that help?
Or connect with peers. Like it's a great bridge to the end of our conversation. If this triggers you, don't waste a minute and connect with Rob or with me, because triggers have no emotion yet. Triggers are actually like a gift from the outside that says, like, this is something you need to work with. So connect and start the conversation. You're not the only one. There are others who have been in this journey, and you need the right people around you. So connect. Maybe that connection helps you with finding the right peer in Rob or me. Or but at least it's the first step in your journey about not trying to make it work on your own, because your how is not sufficient, and your how keeps you hostage, which means that with all your good intentions, you're not moving out of it. You're actually sabotaging yourself, which are really, and I use on purpose those harsh words, that are triggers of ask for help. No shame, just step up, ask for help, get back to the reflection, the self awareness, who you are, and find authentically your way that works. You can't copy it.
Very good.
I hope, because this is the real deal. This is really the real deal. And I could tell you, and you could tell Rob, we are in it. And because life is not just a linear or a curve up, it's like a frequency. So the higher the peak, the lower the valley, what we see in frequencies, it goes up and down. So we have to learn every time again, how do we deal with this? This is my growth space, but it should not be where I camp out too long.
So how do people contact you or I? Are the details all?
Yeah, the details. Well, there is one in the image. It's definitely also in the comments. It's businessrevivalists.com/connect, or just use the direct messaging options we have in all the platforms that we stream to right now.
Okay.
So
great to speak to you, Arjan.
Thank you very much. It was a honest, really honest topic. So thank you very much for you.
Thank you for having me.
See you later.
See you soon.